Good morning. Today on Spotlight, an interview with Yinam Cohen, the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest, based in Chicago. He's a career Foreign Service officer who has worked throughout the world and now has wide jurisdiction in the United States. We'll discuss his job and the impact of the Israel-Hamas war. And later in our Sunday morning program, meet Nicole Stallworth, the new CEO of Detroit's Children's Center. Where does she want to take this advocacy and service organization? We'll find out. It's Sunday, April the 7th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Before we get to the war, which of course is the elephant in the room, let me do a few housekeeping duties here to give our audience some sense of who you are and the office that you represent. First of all, you're the Consul General for the Midwest, so you're based in Chicago, correct?
That's true.
What's your jurisdiction area?
So I'm based in Chicago, and from Chicago we cover the Midwest, that is 9 Midwestern states, all the way from Michigan and Indiana to Nebraska and the Dakotas. It's a big territory, very diverse politically, socially, economically. So Michigan and Detroit are obviously one of the most important parts in our region, and I try to get here as much as I can. I try to come here at least 3 times a year, when I can, even more often.
What is it that your office primarily is responsible for?
So the United States is Israel's closest ally in the world, and we try to really make this alliance grow here in the Midwest, in the region that we cover. So we reach out to elected officials, both at the state level and the federal level from the Midwest. We do a lot of, we try to create a lot of business opportunities between Israel and the Midwest. Here in Michigan, there's a wonderful auto industry. Israel is an amazing hub for smart mobility technologies. So this is something that we try to bring together. But we also reach out to local communities. We try to engage with local communities to understand what they need and how we can support that. For example, just last year, we had a wonderful pitch competition for local NGOs, not-for-profits who work to create social impact in their communities. That was a beautiful opportunity to bring together these communities and Israel.
And that's where you give out grants to community organizations that you feel are doing good work and fitting within the agenda and what you've outlined the reward should be about.
Exactly, because we care a lot of social impact, we want to support that, and this is one way to do that.
What kind of feedback are you getting from both Jewish Americans as well as non-Jewish Americans as you're crisscrossing the Midwest in these very difficult times?
It is, I would say, quite a complicated time for some of the Jewish communities here in the Midwest and all across America. We've seen a tremendous rise in Jew hatred, in anti-Semitism in the past 6 months since October 7th. And this is something that we really discuss both with the communities, the Jewish communities, but also with the many allies of Israel and the Jewish communities here in America, with elected officials, with the press, because something we cannot allow is anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any kind of hatred and bigotry in this country.
Yeah, you've had, I would assume, it's the great fortune of having not just lived in Israel, not just lived in the United States, but you've also lived in Germany. I think you were stationed in
Spain and in Colombia.
Spain and Colombia. Has your role of the work that you had to do differed to a great extent from country to country, or are there some key similarities?
You know what, there is one key similarity, and that is the work to really enhance the partnership between the country that we're stationed at and the state of Israel. But of course, being in the United States brings something very unique because, as I said, the United States is our closest friend in the world. The United States is the world leader. The United States, for many Israelis, is a beacon of freedom and democracy, something we rely on. So everything that's happening in the United States, I would say, holds special importance for us, for the state of Israel and for the world. And this is what makes my job here probably the most unique that I've had in my 18 years as a diplomat. Israel cares a lot about what Americans think, what Americans say, We try to understand better. We try to, even when it has to do with the war in Gaza, there has been some concerns about certain issues after the Hamas attack on Israel, and because of the humanitarian situation both in Gaza and in Israel. We talk to the American administration a lot because we want to be very much coordinated with the Americans, but we also speak to the American people because we care a lot what local communities think and how they see the situation there.
Okay, we need to take a quick little pause for a cause. We'll come right back and we'll kind of zero in on this war over in the Mideast and what impact it's having on the role that you have to play here in the United States.
Perfect.
We'll be right back right after this. As we record, and things change almost on an hourly basis, there have been tragedies on both sides of the fence here. 31,000 Palestinians and more killed in Gaza, certainly hostages on both sides of the fence, prisoners, and a lot of tension now between the United States and Israel, even between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Things have gotten a little more tense in terms of the messages. How are you reading this, and how difficult has this made your job when you hear the president say, look, we need a ceasefire. We also need to make sure that that you're hearing the constituents that I have to represent. And it's gotten tough in his run for re-election, and how both the Democratic and Republican candidates are playing this.
You know, everything started on October 7th when Hamas invaded Israel and killed more than 1,200 people in Israel, conducting a lot of systematic sexual violence against Israeli women and abducting more than 250 people, Israelis and non-Israelis. Some of them are American citizens, by the way, to the Gaza Strip. More than 130 of them are still held in the terror dungeons of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And this is a great concern for us. The operation that Israel went to in the Gaza Strip has two major goals. The first one is to bring back all the hostages. Some of them have been released, others are still there, as I said, for 6 months now. And the second one is really to eliminate the terrorist infrastructure of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, because we're listening very carefully to what Hamas has to say. And what they say after October 7th is that when they can do what they did on October 7th, they will do it over and over again. These are their words. So we have to be very, very cautious about that. Now, I think the American administration, and definitely President Biden, is totally in line with Israel about the need to release the hostages and to eliminate the infrastructure, the terrorist infrastructure of Hamas. President Biden visited Israel 2 weeks into the war to show solidarity and support in these goals.
And he's recently sent more arms to Israel.
And there is a very close military partnership, a strategic partnership between Israel and the United States, which is vital for us and I think is also very important to the United States. It is true that we've been engaged in the past, I would say 2 months, in discussions with the American administration and with our Arab neighbors. Many of them are our partners now because of the peace agreements that we have with many Arab countries, in trying to find a way a deal that would enable the release of all the hostages that are still held in Gaza, and would lead also to an extended ceasefire. An extended ceasefire that would enable to alleviate the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, but also, by the way, the humanitarian situation in Israel, because there is hundreds of thousands of Israelis who had to leave their homes in the south and in the north. They're refugees in their own country for 6 months now, and this is something that we have to solve. There is negotiations going on, but unfortunately, you know, the Americans are agreeing to the deal. Israel is agreeing to the deal. The Arab countries are agreeing to the deal. There's only one element in the Middle East that is refusing to accept the deal, and that's Hamas. And that's what's been, you know, keeping us for 2 months now.
There are a significant number of Jewish Americans who I'm sure you've talked to, who are not fond of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his politics. And do you get this message back to President Netanyahu that how he may be viewed in Israel is not how he's necessarily viewed by many of Jewish descent here in the United States?
You know what, let me tell you one more thing. There's also Israelis who are not fond of Netanyahu, and Israel who support Netanyahu very strongly. That's a great thing about our being a strong democracy in the Middle East. But you know what, it's not about the person, it's about the country. Because what Hamas did on October 7 was not attacking Netanyahu or his government. They attacked the state of Israel, as President Biden said, because they want to destruct the state of Israel and they want to kill as many Jews as they can. And this is why we're operating in the Gaza Strip. It's not about a certain government or a certain personality. It's about the safety and security of the state of Israel, the one and only Jewish state in the world.
Many Palestinians, particularly in this country right now, are saying that this has gone far beyond the tit for tat, that this has become a humanitarian crisis and that there are innocent people that are being caught in the middle of this crossfire. What is it? And granted, it's happening on both sides. And you get into the numbers game, but the reality is that there are innocent people on both sides that have been affected by this. How do you navigate through that to the point where it doesn't look as though we're just wholesale killing here?
Absolutely, this is true. And this is why Israel is very much engaged together with the Americans and our Arab neighbors in trying to find solutions to the humanitarian crisis, both in the Gaza Strip and in Israel. But let's talk about the Gaza Strip. Israel has opened more venues, more corridors to enter trucks with humanitarian supplies from Israel and from Egypt into the Gaza Strip, from the south side, but also from the northern side. We've been engaged with our neighbors to open a maritime corridor that would enable humanitarian supplies come through the Mediterranean Sea, all the way from Cyprus to the Gaza Strip. We try to find any possible solution to alleviate the situation for the civil population in Gaza, because our war is not against the Gazan. It's not against the Palestinians. It's against the terrorist organization of Hamas.
CARE, an organization here that's well respected by many and where we have the largest Middle East population outside of the Middle East, today put out a report entitled Gaza and the Rise in Bigotry Against Michigan Muslims. Their numbers are increasing too in terms of anti-Muslim hate and Islamophobia. So we're seeing it on both sides of the fence. And one also has to look at, in the midst of perhaps the most important presidential election in my memory in the history of this country in recent years, this is going to have an impact on how people vote and who they see as the leader that maybe best can deal with this type of rise of anti-hate on both sides of the fence. Your thoughts about that?
Anti-Semitism has been an issue for some years now. I read the report of the FBI, the American FBI, about hate crimes in 2022, and it found out that 60% of religious-based hate crimes were targeting Jews. 60%, when American Jews are only make 2 or 2.5% of the American population. 60%. And the Anti-Defamation League has documented a rise of 300% in hate crimes against Jews since October 7th. So this is a great concern for me. I'm also aware that white supremacists are attacking also members of the Muslim communities here in America, and this is very bad too. So I think our goal right now is not, and the goal of local leaders and politicians, is not to create divisiveness among the communities, but to bring the communities together. Because I think that we have to stand together against any kind of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any kind of hate or bigotry. Now, how does that affect American politics? You know what, I'm not an expert on American politics. As a diplomat, I prefer not to make comments on American politics.
These days, I don't think anybody is.
That's true, but I just say that for us, for me as an Israeli diplomat, one of the most important pillars of our policy here and our work here is bipartisanship. We work, of course, with both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and we try to make both of them, being advocates for the very important relations between Israel and the United States.
Mr. Consul General, thanks so much for joining us today on Spotlight, and we'll get you back. And coming up, we'll sit down with Nicole Stallworth. She is the new CEO of the Children's Center in the heart of Detroit. We'll be right back. Your organization has been around since 1929. Neither one of us have been around that long. But if someone stopped you on the street and said, Nicole, in a nutshell, what is the Children's Center?
Yeah,
What
the
would you say?
Children's Center has been around since 1929. It was founded by Senator James Cousins at that time during the Great Depression as a result of his observation that many children in the Detroit area were suffering from homelessness or depression and in need of a home or some form of psychiatric support. And so the Children's Center was formed to be able to serve that need. And here we are 95 years later, continuing to be able to provide evidence-based clinical therapy to children who need it. We also recruit and train caring licensed foster homes so that any child that may be dealing with or have experienced any form of trauma or neglect, we're able to place that child in those homes, and then our caring professionals will be able to support those young people and those families throughout their entire time in foster care and hopefully in some cases adoption.
Sure. So the mission in many respects sounds like it has not changed drastically since 1929, but certainly the community, the people you serve, the city has changed within that time. As the relatively new CEO, where do you want to take it?
Yeah, our mission is really to help children and families shape their own futures. We want to continue to be that beacon of hope in the community, helping children and empowering them really with the tools that they need to be able to deal with any circumstance that they may find themselves in, whether that be in emotional behaviors in school or any form of mental or emotional or behavioral health diagnosis, or any time a child or a young person is placed in the foster care system. Our job is really to empower them with the tools that they need in order to be able to determine their own life's trajectory. Over the course of these past few years, I want to just name a few things that have happened, I think, since the pandemic.
Okay.
And one of those things is that in 2021, the Michigan Citizens Research Council conducted a study where they found 17% of young people between the ages of 12 and 17 were admitted or seen in an emergency room due to depression or experienced a depressive episode. And it was also found that about a third of those young people were not successful in their ability to get treatment. And so as we think about who we are serving, our goal is to really make sure that we are working with all of the systems in which these young people come into contact with, like their school systems, the K through 12 school systems. We do have programs where we work together with the court systems and law enforcement and community organizations that serve families to make sure that we are accessible to those children and young people, and they understand, and the families really understand how they might be able to get support for their youth and their child who may be dealing with a concern like that.
Very good. All right, we need to take a quick little break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about some of the services that are offered, as well as the advocacy role that is involved in all this.
Awesome.
All right, we'll be right back with Ms. Stallworth
Thank
right
you.
after this. In a nutshell, what services are offered?
So
And do you have the staff you need now to meet the needs?
there is a shortage of providers or clinical therapists, social workers, people going into that field in our state of Michigan. And so we're doing quite a bit of advocacy to ensure that there is an understanding about that need and that we're partnering with institutions like Wayne State University and other higher education institutions to help create a pipeline into the Children's Center for treatment providers. In fact, on April 24th, we'll be hosting a job fair to be able to recruit more therapists who want to work with children to support this work.
You have a big soapbox here. You have an organization that's been around for a long time. So I would imagine you have to go to Lansing and other places to talk to government officials and say we need more funding, more support. And you have the distinction of being married to a former Michigan legislator, so I imagine he's been a little bit of help in saying, all right, Nicole, you got to get in the faces of the people who can appropriate money.
Absolutely. Well, Tommy's brilliant with that. I am constantly in Lansing, and our organization does a lot in this realm of advocacy, ensuring that legislators, public officials, decision makers understand the need for funding to support community mental health programs, the need to make sure that the reimbursement rates for the treatment and the services that we provide are able to cover the costs of the services and allow for us to recruit those expert individuals that are able to provide that care to our young people and their families, and also ensuring that there are policies in place within our state that promote child well-being, and that's across systems.
And do you feel, and time unfortunately our worst enemy right now, do you feel as though the legislators are hearing you and responding and understand this need, that it all starts with children, and that has a major impact on our society and communities as a whole?
I've gotten some positive feedback from the conversations that we've had. We engage our families around this as well with the individuals in Lansing that represent them. And I can tell you that the feedback has been positive. In fact, Governor Whitmer is increasing the amount of funding that's going into mental health services, and in particular for children and young people. So I do see that that many of our elected officials and elected leaders do understand what the need is. And it's just a matter of making sure that we can continue to promote from an advocacy perspective, keeping that a priority.
Keep pushing it.
We have to make sure that we don't allow some other issue to get in front of our issue around making sure that we have enough resources to support children and their mental health needs.
Sure. If people want to get in touch with your organization, is there a particular website, hotline?
Yes, it's www.thechildrencenter.com. Our phone number is 313-831-5535, and they can reach out to us via our website to find out more about the services that we provide and how they can get involved.
All right. Nicole Stallworth, thanks for joining us today on Spotlight, and we'll stay in touch with you and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, it's our pleasure. And I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the Spotlight. We hope you have a great week.